time to start anew. It's time to start fresh and try something different. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do here, as we are test running a new series that will be showing up on YouTube, and it is The Transition. As everybody knows, in the mid-1990s, the WWE was going through its worst period ever. Specifically in 1995, when business hit an all-time low. But then, things started to change. Things started to change in 1996, in 1997, in 1998, and everything hit its peak in 1999. The Attitude Era made WWE the big time. For the last 4 years, in-game, I have worked as Shane McMahon, as the booker of WWE, under Vince, to transform this company from the hokey comedic 1991 or early 1990s that WWE was, to a more serious real company. And, going from having Mr. Perfect and the Warrior as the champion to Bret and Owen as the champions, we'll do that because both guys are very well versed in the ring. The other thing I wanted to point out is when, I can pull up alumni. When guys like Bam Bam Bigelow, when guys like, Bam Bam Bigelow, when guys like Chris Benoit, when guys like Davey Boy Smith, Warrior, $1 Million Man, Roddy Piper, no, I thought Nikita might have gotten stolen, but he didn't. Animal. Not Hawk, Animal. Sergeant Slaughter. Rick Martel. The list can go on and on and on as you've seen me scroll through my alumni list. And if Big Boss Man. All these guys have been stolen by the WCW, so it forced my hand. Jim Duggan, Jim Neidhart. Yes, Jim Neidhart got stolen by WCW. Brian Knobbs actually got stolen by WCW too. Jerry Saggs didn't. Jerry Saggs is on free agency. Hawk is on free agency. Animal got stolen. Point is, they forced my hand to push the next generation, and set myself up for the transitional period after Savage left, because Flair got released by WCW because Jim Herd is the president of WCW when you started, and Jim Herd hates Ric Flair. So with that being said, Flair couldn't be re-signed. But I have swooped in and stolen some people back from WCW, namely Brian Pillman, who got released, and Ric Flair, who got released. But the main thing I've done is worked for the last 3 years to elevate Bret Hart. I've worked for the last 3 years to keep The Undertaker high. I got lucky that Shawn Michaels went to the movies, went and filmed a movie, and now Shawn Michaels is ready, willing, and able to get back and become one of the top babyfaces in the company, after just being a heel for the most part in his rise to the top. Ricky Steamboat is still here. Ric Flair is still here. Hulk Hogan is still here. Then you got other guys like Ken Shamrock, who is finding his footing as a main event guy, and is going to come in and out as far as doing MMA fights, and, you know, using that reality of him being an MMA fighter to make our product better. Eddie's going up. Mike Awesome is going up. Mike Awesome is in the future. One person that I've been focusing on is Chris Candido and Brian Lee. You know, just to point out, look at where Brian Lee was and look at where he is now. You know, we're starting to turn Brian Clark babyface to feud him with Paul Roma, who Paul Roma and him have been a tag team for a while. Tommy Rich just came back from a stint in rehab, and instead of keeping that quiet, that's the extension of the feud. That's why Tommy is back. He's seeking redemption. He's seeking some form of redemption from that mistake that he made. Rock and Roll Express are here. Wait, before I forget, and and Candido interrupted Tommy. So not only is he making claiming that Ken Shamrock is afraid of Brian Lee, and that's why Ken Shamrock left, he also is now sticking his nose in Tommy Rich's business to keep Candido doing something while Ken is gone. Bret Hart and The Undertaker are feuding for the first time over the world title. Shawn Michaels is going to be going up against his former bodyguard once he returns. Ric Flair recently turned babyface on Bobby Heenan, as you can see, after Bobby tried to help Flair win the vacated title and actually cost him the title, and then helped him win the match against Bret Hart to get into the WrestleMania main event, which I will pull up right now, and actually cost Bret Hart the WrestleMania main event. I would also point out that Bret and Owen both ended WrestleMania 11 as champion and celebrated in the ring together. You know, and that will lead somewhere, but we will see as time you will see as time progresses. I also just want to point out that Raven has a group, that being Papa Shango, Mankind, and the Unabomb, and they're up against Owen Hart as a short feud for Mr. Owen. But part of this is going to be looking at the show. So without further ado, let's jump into this week's episode of Raw. Ahmed Johnson recently came back from a short hiatus, and now he's stocking up on wins to start building his new name and to start him with a new identity and some new momentum. This starts the feud as between Raven and Owen Hart, as Raven claims to have found his next victim. Now we move to one of the highlights of the show, or one of the parts of the show that I was looking forward to see how well it would do. Candido and a continuation of Candido's feud with Ken Shamrock. Candido, following his match, we move to an interview with Gene interviewing Shane Shamrock, Ken's brother, quote unquote, who's sitting in the front row, and Candido takes exception to the spotlight going so quickly off of him and on to somebody else that they go over to Shane Shamrock. And, well, this happens. Shane Shamrock is being Brian Lee and Candido to feel the fan Shane Shamrock over the rail and bring him into the ring and start beating on him, but Tommy Rich makes the save, and both guys fight off Candido and Brian Lee, bringing up the interesting part of, well, changing the guard. The fact that Candido and Brian Lee just assaulted a fan, even though the fan held his own, and even though the fan, even though Shane Shamrock is a wrestler, they still beat up a fan. They still beat up an uncontracted employee, somebody who's not contracted to the WWE. So the shock and awe of them beating up a fan, there you go. Owen beats the Unabomb after Papa Shango runs in and distracts him, causing the DQ, protecting the Unabomb. But then Owen gets attacked, and the numbers game is a little bit too much for the Intercontinental Champion to handle. This is the point, though. This is the point. Let him get beaten down. Because this is gonna start... This is... Well, that's the point of the feud, the numbers game. Let's get it to Owen Hart. He's gonna dissect him piece by piece. Harvey Wippleman manages Van Hammer and Bradshaw, and they fought Shane Douglas and Mark Merrow. And basically, this is the way of trying to reestablish Harvey Wippleman's team, because they challenged the Rock and Roll Express, because the Rock and Roll came in at the beginning of last month before WrestleMania, or it was 2 months ago. It was 2 months ago that they came in and challenged Samu and Fatu and won, or Samu and Tama, and won, getting a tag team title shot at WrestleMania, winning the tag team titles. Now, the former tag team champions, Hammer and Bradshaw, take exception to the Rock and Roll coming in and jumping ahead of them in the line as far as getting a tag team title shot. Scorpio beats Bruiser Bedlam, and Scorpio calls out Eddie Guerrero, and they talk about their match that happened at Saturday night, and they both agree that they want to do it again, but need more time, because their match ended in a time limit draw at the pay-per-view at Saturday night's main event, and they need more time. So that's exactly what they're gonna get. But they just need approval. And the approval comes from President J.J. Dillon. Tito Santana gets his win back after losing to Mike Awesome at Saturday Night's Main Event again, and beats Lance Storm. Speaking of Mike Awesome, Tito and Lance Storm shake hands after the match, and Mike Awesome jumps both men following the match, making even more of an impact and showing how dangerous Mike Awesome is. Now we move to the upper card and the upper echelon, and Ric Flair talks about Brian Pillman, because Brian Pillman debuted a few weeks ago attacking Ric Flair and siding with Bobby Heenan as Bobby Heenan's new client to replace Ric Flair. And Flair talks about he's heard great things about Brian Pillman. He remembers Brian Pillman from his former employer, but his first mistake was siding with Bobby Heenan because Bobby Heenan is a leech. And now we move to the main event with Jeff Jarrett and Ric Flair, with Jeff Jarrett getting intentionally counted out thanks to Jerry Lawler, because Lawler cost him the match after Jarrett cost Lawler, I think it was either a match with Bret Hart or a match with Hulk Hogan a few weeks ago, getting intentionally disqualified. Following the match, Flair notices Bobby on the ramp, and the royal family argues at ringside. And let's see how good... Okay, don't show me how good the show did. My point is, looking at this show and seeing the slight change in booking, a little bit more of an infusion of attitude into the show. Just small spurts of attitude going into the show, and with, a little segment here, a little segment there, a little segment here, with Candido and Brian Lee jumping Shane Shamrock, who was a fan, who was sitting in the front row. Or well, that's pretty much it on that show as far as, a little bit more attitude, but that's the point. You're gonna take it slow. I'm not gonna transform it overnight and change things overnight, because that's not how it works. You don't change things overnight. Things don't change overnight. You take it slow, and you do the transition as you go. Yes, I'm working with Memphis, as you can tell, because I have Lawler, I have Brian Lee, and I have, I thought I had somebody else from them, but I guess I don't think I do, actually. I have Lawler and Brian Lee. But, either way, it's a slow transition. It's a slow burn to move to a more attitude-based program and less of a hokey, comedic program. Because it's also that my idea of transitioning from where WWF used to be to where they could be, to infuse a little bit more attitude into the product. You don't need to go Jerry Springer show. You could take it, you could move and make the transition, but make it serious. Make it matter. Make it where you don't make a joke out of wrestling. Because one wrong move with somebody, and they get the reputation of being a joke. Like, Sunny is developing. Sunny just signed, and she is slowly developing. Just look at you remember Brian Lee. Well, look at Sunny. Look at the jump that she has had in the last 2 months since she signed her contract with me in in February. My point is, Sunny doesn't need to come here and just be tits and ass. She can actually be a manager. She can actually be helpful. She can actually matter. She can actually be a serious person to be there. That you don't just look at her because she's hot. You look at her because you think she's a bitch. And you wish that somebody would give her comeuppance. Sort of the Stephanie McMahon syndrome, but a man is not going to hit a woman. You want to see Sunny get embarrassed. You don't want to see Sunny get embarrassed because you're a horny teenager. You want to see Sunny get embarrassed because you think she's a bitch. That's where we're going. That we're going to see more attitude, more serious, reality-based storylines, more in-your-face action. But it's going to matter. It's not going to be where I trade off the wrestling for the attitude. But that's why this is a dry run. Let's see how it goes. And let me know what you think. How would you have made it different? How would you go about the transition from comedic 1980s WWE and early 90s WWE to the Attitude Era? Do you think in 1995 the world has changed, wrestling has changed enough to where the Attitude Era would have worked, making the move a year or two sooner? Because remember, it was a slow burn. They didn't move to the Attitude Era right away. You have to condition your fan base to know what they're watching is sticking around. The new attitude is sticking around. And that's why it's going to take a long time. You're not going to see it by SummerSlam. You may see a little more of it by SummerSlam, but it's going to be a year. It's going to be a year and a half. It's going to take 2 years to get to the point where the Attitude Era is in full effect in the WWF. So, you want to get on the train? You want to enjoy the ride? You want to see what happens? Watch the videos. Watch along as I book the transition from the new generation to the Attitude Era. And feel free to let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Thoughts on booking, thoughts on talent, anything you want to tell me, I'm all ears and more than willing to hear you out. Just let me know down in the comment section below what you think of the transition from the next generation, from the new generation, to the Attitude Era. You don't want to leave a comment? Feel free to leave a like. Subscribe to the channel for more content just like this that you can only find right here at Wrestling Express. Till next time. Later.